A ringing echo, a distant call, will lead to one man's unknowing fall. A loving father, a caring staff, but now he'll face his employment's wrath. Hello everyone, welcome back. Whenever a player steps foot into a new game, it's always helpful to have some type of tutorial, a guide that teaches players the mechanics and systems before they jump too far into the story. But creating a tutorial is easier said than done. Making it too complex or too tedious can negatively impact a player's experience. The best kinds of tutorials are the ones that teach you what you have to know, leave a lasting impression so you can remember how to play the game, and then once they fulfill their purpose, vanish like the wind. For Five Nights at Freddy's, the most memorable and reliable vessel for said tutorials has always been our unseen friend, the Phone Guy. Phone Guy has had an odd history when it comes to FNAF characters. He's a weird situation where he never appears physically in the series. We only ever hear his voice over different phone calls, hence the name. For a good while, he was one of the most important and consistent characters in the franchise, but his time was incredibly short-lived. Despite that, I would say even to this day, he's still one of the most iconic human characters. Because of this, I want to properly give him his flowers. But of course, like always, the story of Five Nights at Freddy's is incredibly confusing, with many key plot points being held up by fan speculation and headcanons. So your interpretation about what Phone Guy was really like may be different than mine, and that's completely okay. Comment down below what your personal takeaways are. I love reading them. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave a like. Hyping the video also helps immensely if you can. If you'd like, comment down below what FNAF character you'd like to see get analyzed next. I have my eyes on a few specific ones, but I always want to keep your thoughts in mind too. With that out of the way, let's uncover the tragedy of the Phone Guy, the first real character in Five Nights at Freddy's. To start our journey, we have to go back to the very beginning. If you were to go and revisit the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, something that may stick out is how much it lacks in story compared to its sequels. This was before the complex multimedia franchise was conceptualized, before the books and movies and spin-offs. In this game, it's just you in a room with 4 hulking robotic beasts hunting you down. While there wasn't much of a complex story, the characters introduced would go on to be iconic in the franchise. We had the made-for animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, the creepy golden Freddy suit that would rarely randomly appear to you, and we had the unseen night guard character we were playing as, Mike Schmidt. But here's the thing. These characters don't really have much character per se. They have no personality traits, no development, and none of them even speak. The animatronics are emotionless machines, and Mike is silent throughout the entirety of the game. There is no real character to be found in any of them. The focus in FNAF 1 is primarily on the gameplay and how the animatronics function as obstacles, not as characters. And since Mike in this game is meant to be a self-insert for the audience, he also lacks in personality. That being said, there is one more character introduced in this game that does show personality, who does have character, and even goes through a slight bit of development. And you meet him as soon as you open the game and start to hear the ringing of a phone.
Hello? Hello? I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night.
This is the very first thing you'll hear when you start the game, a voice calling you on the office phone. This character goes unnamed in this game, but the fanbase collectively decided to name him the Phone Guy. He is the first character in the series to not only have proper voice lines, but to have personality traits and an actual character to analyze. A big thing to note, however, is that despite the phone ringing beforehand, these aren't live phone calls, they're pre-recorded messages. Because of that, we don't have any actual conversations with him. Mike just listens to the calls throughout each night.
I actually worked in that office before you. I'm finishing up my last week now, as a matter of fact, so I know it can be a bit overwhelming, but I'm here to tell you there's nothing to worry about. You'll do fine. So let's just focus on getting you through your first week, okay?
Phone Guy's role as the previous night guard is extremely important when it comes to his line delivery throughout the nights. His character is going to go through a moderate change as we continue to listen to his calls, but for now, let's keep listening.
Let's see. First, there's an introductory greeting from the company that I'm supposed to read. It's kind of a legal thing, you know. Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a magical place for kids and grown-ups alike. where fantasy and fun come to life. Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced. Blah, blah, blah. Now, that might sound bad, I know, but there's really nothing to worry about. The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night, but do I blame them? No. If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
This dialogue actually shares a lot about Fall Guys' priorities and would pave the way for how the company that owns Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would be portrayed in future games. Fazbear Entertainment, the company behind the Freddy's characters and locations, created this opening message to clear themselves of any liability, and this intro perfectly tells the audience how negligent they are. Essentially, if you die on the job, the company can take up to 3 months to make it publicly known you're missing, and that's after they remove any of the evidence of a fatality. That is a massive red flag for any job, and Phone Guy's immediate downplaying of the danger you're in shows a lot about his character. He says there's nothing to worry about, and those little silly animatronics aren't dangerous, they're just quirky. They are not quirky, they are murdery. Very, very murdery. It's pretty obvious that the Phone Guy may not have our best interest in mind. But the real question is, why is he making this greeting seem like it's not a big deal? Regardless, the call continues on.
So remember, these characters hold a special place in the hearts of children, and we need to show them a little respect, right? Okay.
I want you to remember this line. It may seem odd now, but I promise it will make sense later.
So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long.
Slowly, Phone Guy does give more information on the animatronics and how they, as he says, wander a bit. Again, he's downplaying something that begs for more questions and clarification. The idea of animatronics wandering around aimlessly, considering the technology available at the time, is not normal. But as he brushed that off, he also gives us this iconic line.
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
This one quote jump-started the FNAF theory community back in 2014 and is still a major topic even today. The Bite of 87 is by far the most well-known event in the entire series' history, and it's only ever directly mentioned right here in the first phone call of the first game. While this entry doesn't really have a story, it did have the ripe beginnings of deep lore, something that would only become more prevalent as the series goes on.
Now concerning your safety, the only real risk to you as a night watchman here, if any, is the fact that these characters, if they happen to see you after hours, probably won't recognize you as a person. They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on.
Phone Guy finally begins to open up about the actual dangerous threats you have to know about. He explains if the animatronics see the player after hours, they wouldn't recognize you as a person. Instead, they would think you were a metal endoskeleton. Of course, this isn't exactly true. We now know that the animatronics are hostile towards adults specifically because the main villain of the series, William Afton, killed at least 5 children and stuffed their bodies into the animatronic suits. This in turn caused the animatronics of the series to become haunted with the souls of the children, and the rest is history. I do find his dialogue fascinating, however, because it's obvious that he's trying to slowly build up to revealing the true danger of working here, but he's hesitant. Of course, he does have to finally tell us what will happen.
Now, since that's against the rules here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if the suits themselves weren't filled with cross beams, wires, and animatronic devices, especially around the facial area. So you can imagine how having your head forcefully pressed inside one of those could cause a bit of discomfort and death. The only parts of you that would likely see the light of day again would be your eyeballs and teeth when they pop out the front of the mask. Yeah, they don't tell you these things when you sign up.
The way Phone Guy goes on about all these awful, horrible things that will happen if you get caught fascinate me. He says it all in a hesitant, uncomfortable way, like he's seen firsthand what the animatronics are capable of. He was downplaying a lot of the dangers of his job earlier, but as he talks about the truth of what's going on, the real and present threat, you can hear him accept it, except that right now, he's in that position. When he started talking about the way your eyeballs would pop out of the mask, he sounded scared. Remember, these calls were recorded the prior week to Mike working there. Phone Guy still has to deal with Freddy and the gang, just like how we are. The reality of the situation he's currently in is slowly hitting him as he warns Mike about these dangers, and he's scared of what he'll have to face.
But hey, first station of the breeze. I'll chat with you tomorrow. Check those cameras and remember to close the doors only if absolutely necessary. Gotta conserve power. Alright, good night.
I love how abrupt the ending of this call is. It's like he remembered how long this has gone on for and realized he should let the future night guard focus on the task at hand. If this little tutorial feels like it's missing something, it's because it is. In his haste to end the call, Phone Guy forgot to actually teach us how to fight the animatronics. He just threw in a basic idea of what we should be doing at the very end of the call. Check the cameras to see where the animatronics are, close the doors when we need to, and conserve power. But I don't think that makes this a bad introduction per se, especially since Night 1 isn't really that difficult to beat. Bonnie and Chica are the only two animatronics active, so all you have to do is close the doors when you see them. It's pretty easy to pick up on, even if you're brand new to the game. I think this first call does a better job at setting up the atmosphere. You're playing as someone trapped in a room with very few tools to defend yourself, and those said tools are also on a limited battery that you have to conserve. While you're figuring this out for yourself, the guy that's supposed to be a comforting, helpful presence continually downplays how dangerous this job really is. And only near the end of his call does he finally relent and tell you the seriousness of the situation. All of this at once can help make the player feel stressed and alone. That's why I actually really like this introduction. It is a bad tutorial on how to play the game, but that's kind of the point. You'd think a voice talking to you during the night would be more comforting, but here it's the opposite. Phone Guy's role in the early game is to make you feel as uncomfortable and isolated as possible, and I think he does that with flying colors. Phone Guy is voiced by none other than the creator of the game series himself, Scott Cawthon. While he doesn't have many roles to his name, Scott has had a history of voice acting in his previous projects before he made FNAF. And since this entire game was made only by him, it makes sense that he would also be voicing the only speaking role. I think he does a pretty great job. The random ums and stutters make the call feel authentic. And to go off from there, let's talk a bit about how Phone Guy's character is portrayed so far. To me, he reads as someone who isn't exactly a bad person, but is a minimizer when it comes to dangers present. A minimizer is somebody who reduces the importance of something to the least possible amount, in this situation that being the dangers that are currently present. He knows that working at Freddy's is dangerous, but he dismisses the threats in an attempt to reassure Mike. I don't think he necessarily needs Mike to stay in this position. He already said he's finishing up his last week. By the time Mike takes his spot, he's already finished up his shifts. I think it's more because of this quote right here.
So remember, these characters hold a special place in the hearts of children, and we need to show them a little respect, right? Okay.
Phone Guy is very passionate about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the impact it has on kids. It says a lot that all of his other lines have a nervous tone to them, but this one is completely serious. He's being 100% genuine here. He cares about the characters of Freddy's and how much the children love them, and this will play into his character more in the future. He most likely wants Mike to stay in this job position because he wants the Freddy's characters to be guarded at night, so that they can continue to bring smiles to the children. This is pretty much all we can take away from the first phone call. The first call is the longest of the entire game, and the others are much shorter with less character to analyze, but they do still hold some important information we can glean. After beating Night 1, you're immediately launched into Night 2. Once again, you are greeted by another message from the Phone Guy.
Hello? Hello? Well, if you're hearing this and you made it to day 2, congrats. I won't talk quite as long this time since Freddy and his friends tend to become more active as the week progresses. It might be a good idea to peek at those cameras while I talk, just to make sure everyone's in their proper place, you know.
Unlike the previous night, Phone Guy almost immediately starts to give us some actual helpful tips that are useful as the nights progress. You probably already figured out that you should be looking at the cameras while he talks, but having that reminder is an alert to the audience that the animatronics are going to start moving faster than they were before. I imagine that Phone Guy realized in hindsight that he didn't give us any proper information on how to combat the animatronics, because during night 2 he gives us way more information than before. Scott most likely had the time to rewrite and re-record these lines if this was a mistake, so I like to imagine this was done on purpose.
Interestingly enough, Freddy himself doesn't come off stage very often. I've heard he becomes a lot more active in the dark though, so hey, I guess that's one more reason not to run out of power, right?
This is our proper introduction to Freddy's first mechanic. If you ran out of power the night before, you've probably realized that if you do use up all your power, Freddy will eventually appear outside your door and try to kill you after playing the Toreador March on his music box. It's probably one of the most iconic parts of the first Five Nights at Freddy's game.
I also want to emphasize the importance of using your door lights. There are blind spots in your camera views, and those blind spots happen to be right outside your doors. So if you can't find something or someone on your cameras, be sure to check the door lights. You might only have a few seconds to react. Not that you would be in any danger, of course. I'm not implying that.
This next chunk of dialogue is interesting to me, as Phone Guy gives us some really useful info, then almost immediately falls back into his minimizer behavior. This part of the call gives you a clue on how to play the game in the later nights, by not following Bonnie and Chica with the cameras and focusing instead on the door lights. Bonnie and Chica can only attack when they are directly outside your left and right doors, and these spots are not covered by the cameras. So shutting the door only when you see them in the light can help you save on power. This information is incredibly helpful, but then Phone Guy immediately follows it up with, not that you'd be in any danger, of course. Once again, he's downplaying the threats that are very obviously present in the establishment. It's almost funny how he goes from genuinely helpful to deterring in a matter of seconds.
Also, check on the curtain in Pirate Cove from time to time. The character in there seems unique in that he becomes more active if the cameras remain off for long periods of time. I guess he doesn't like being watched. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure you have everything under control. Talk to you soon.
And this is our introduction to the brand new animatronic threat that we have to face, Foxy. Unlike Bonnie and Chica, Foxy's mechanics are a bit more complicated to figure out on your own. You have to check him constantly on the Pirate Cove camera to see his progression states. Only once he's gone from the cove will he finally run towards your office. To fend him off, you simply have to close the door when he's running down the hall. He'll bang on it a few times, then he'll go back to his cove. These instructions kinda had to be included in a call, it's just too technical. Because of that, Foxy isn't a present threat on night 1, though there is an extremely rare chance of you triggering him. I honestly think introducing him in night 2 and pairing it with an explanation on his mechanics was the best way to go. It makes it so the player isn't caught randomly by Foxy not knowing how to counter him, and when night 2 rolls around they can start to find a rhythm juggling Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica. As for Phone Guy's character, there's not too much to say for this call. He's mostly focused on giving you important information about the animatronics, but I do find it interesting how he pays special attention to Foxy. This won't be the last time we see him focus on Foxy specifically. Of course, he has a unique mechanic in this game that needs explaining, but Phone Guy talking about him specifically will become important later. Phone Guy's focus on information during this call also reads to me as him slowly opening up. I don't think it's appropriate to say he gets more comfortable with Mike. He never actually met him since these are pre-recorded calls. But I do think he gets more comfortable with the idea of letting this new guy in on all the tricks he's figured out when it comes to fighting the animatronics. They're in the same position after all, so maybe he's starting to feel a sort of kinship with his future successor. That's pretty much all we can take away from the second call. As we move into the next section, we will see Phone Guy slowly unravel throughout the rest of the game, and trust me, it's gonna be rough to watch. Night 3 is where I would say the difficulty starts to properly ramp up. This is the night where all 4 characters are active threats for the first time, and it's your big test on if you understand all the mechanics and can repel the animatronics effectively. And of course, we have another call from the Phone Guy to listen to while we defend ourselves.
Hello, hello! Hey, you're doing great! Most people don't last this long. I mean, they usually move on to other things by now. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant. Anyway, I better not take up too much of your time. Things start getting real tonight.
Almost immediately, Phone Guy blurts out something he probably wasn't supposed to say. He does try to cover it, but that actually makes no sense in hindsight. Why would someone immediately move on to another job when they haven't even done a full week at their current job? It also probably doesn't help that he all but confirms most of the other night guards in Mike's position die by now. I think this is another hint that Phone Guy is getting more comfortable talking about the real things going on at Freddy's. So comfortable, in fact, he starts to talk a bit more freely.
Hey, listen, I had an idea. If you happen to get caught and want to avoid getting stuffed into a Freddy suit, try playing dead. Go limp. Then there's a chance that maybe they'll think that you're an empty costume instead. Then again, if they think you're an empty costume, they might try to stuff a metal skeleton into you. I wonder how that would work. Yeah, never mind. Scratch that. It's best just not to get caught.
I find this little ramble he goes on morbidly curious due to his slow realization of how this plan may play out, but I also find it kinda sad. It's obvious that Phone Guy is getting more nervous and worried as his week goes on, facing the exact same foes as we are. With all his time fighting the animatronics, noticing how much more difficult things are becoming, he's been attempting to come up with some kind of plan if he is caught. Obviously, the idea of getting an endoskeleton shoved into you instead of you getting shoved into a suit is like 10 times worse. Going limp is definitely the worst thing to do in that situation, but it shows that Phone Guy is scared enough that he's using this call as a way to speak his idea out loud and see how it may be viable, and instead he only realizes it may make things worse. It's sad to see him in this state. I wouldn't exactly say he's confiding this idea to Mike, rather he's just speculating and rambling on, trying to find a way to live as his inability to manage the animatronics becomes worse. It also says a lot that at the end of the call, you can hear him suddenly snap back to reality and abruptly end the message.
Okay, I'll leave you to it. See you on the flip side.
He ended it so abruptly, in fact, that he forgot something. This is the night that Freddy Fazbear himself becomes an active threat, and he is the most complicated animatronic to deal with. From night 3 onward, you will have to repeatedly check both Freddy on the main stage and Foxy in Pirate's Cove. Unlike with Foxy, if you don't check Freddy enough, he will move to another camera with a loud, low laugh. After this, Freddy will not return to his starting position. He will be locked to whatever camera he's on unless you stop checking him. Every time you stop checking on Freddy, he will slowly move down your right hall and eventually stand in the right hallway corner camera. The only way to stop Freddy after this point is to close the door before he laughs again and enters your office. He is by far the most complicated and difficult animatronic to deal with in the first game, pretty fitting for the namesake of the franchise, and Phone Guy completely skipped over him. Because he was so focused on his potential survival strategy, the player is forced to learn how Freddy functions the hard way, with trial and error. It took a while for the fanbase to figure out how to deal with Freddy, especially when it came to the challenges like 420 mode, where you're basically forced to keep him in your right hall corner the entire night. So why does Phone Guy not tell us about Freddy? Well, that's the sad part. Once you figure out Freddy in best night 3, you move on to night 4, where you are once again treated to another phone call. This time, I'm going to let you hear the whole thing at once. Here it is.
Wow, day 4. I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did. Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. Oh no.
And thus, we learn the fate of the phone guy. During the end of his last week, he was unable to deal with all of the animatronics at once, and was forcibly stuffed into a Freddy suit. The saddest part about this is that there is absolutely nothing we could do. This already happened last week before Mike even started his job. Maybe phone guy tried to hold out in the suit for a while, but judging by the death screen we get if Mike is stuffed into one, it's unlikely that he survived. What's worse is phone guy already said that a missing persons report would only be sent out after 90 days, or when all traces of evidence are gone. Even if we were to check the empty heads, we wouldn't find anything, not even a body to turn into the police. Phone guy is long gone before we even started the game. The fanbase has speculated for a long time which animatronic killed phone guy, but I believe I have a good idea judging on the evidence. In the call, we can hear banging on the door, a scratchy moan, the Toreador March music box, then finally, the famous Golden Freddy roar. These are all things from all the different animatronics in the game. The banging from Foxy, the moaning from Bonnie and Chica, the music box from Freddy, and of course Golden Freddy's roar. While individually, these are all things the animatronics do in gameplay, they can all be applied to one character. While Foxy does bang on your left door, Freddy laughs before he tries to get into your office once he's next to your right door. Presumably, he would also bang on your door once he can't get in. Since both Bonnie and Chica moan once they're in the office, it makes sense that both Foxy and Freddy would be able to do the same thing. They just jump scare you before it could happen. Freddy is also the only character to have the Toreador March music box, and on top of that, the iconic Golden Freddy roar is actually just a slowed down version of the normal jump scare sound, which all four animatronics can perform. Putting all the evidence together, I believe it's pretty likely that Phone Guy was caught by Freddy Fazbear himself, which would also lend credence to why we never got any tips for fighting Freddy in the Night 3 phone call. Phone Guy never figured out how to fight Freddy, but Mike did. Mike survived and succeeded where Phone Guy failed. It's a bittersweet moment of hindsight. As for Night 4's gameplay, it's pretty much the same as the previous night with a greater difficulty. All of the animatronics are out to play, now it's up to you to fend them off. There is a phone call left for you in Night 5, but since Phone Guy is now dead, it's a bit different. I'll let you take a listen. Yeah, pretty creepy. Night 5's gameplay is just like Nights 3 and 4, only with a higher difficulty of course. If you beat the previous nights, you should know how to beat this one. After completing the game, you receive a check for your hard work and unlock Night 6. Unfortunately, both Night 6 and the unlockable Night 7, aka the custom night, don't have any phone calls for you to listen to. Thus ends Phone Guy's story in the first 5 Nights at Freddy's game. To say he's a mixed bag would be putting it lightly. Phone Guy is such a fascinating early character in FNAF, because I would say he's our first example of the series playing with the idea of a morally gray character. I don't think he's evil per se. It's obvious that he has no ill intent to the night guard he leaves these tapes for, but he isn't exactly a good person either. He downplays so much of the shady events happening at Freddy's, and it takes a while for him to slowly give us the information we need. Maybe he is doing it for a good reason. He obviously loves the Freddy's characters and wants someone to watch after them for the kids, but that doesn't excuse his minimizing, because he's putting this ahead of the future night guard's safety. That being said, he does slowly give us all the information he has when it comes to fighting the animatronics, only for him to swiftly bite the dust soon after. It leaves you with mixed feelings on the guy, but I don't think it's a stretch to say it's still sad to see him go out like that. So you're probably wondering, if Phone Guy is now dead, how is there still so much of the video left? Well, that answer is given to us in the next game. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is my favorite entry in the entire series. I know that mechanically it's probably aged the worst out of all the original games, but there's something about the reaction-based mechanics that just sit well with me. I adore going back to this game and experiencing the thrill and challenge, but even then, FNAF 2 is also incredibly important to the series, as this is where the deep lore really started taking root. It introduced secret minigames that told abstract stories, foreshadowed future events that would go on to pave the narrative, and of course, course it introduced a ton of brand new characters for us to love. The story here is that there's a brand new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza restaurant that just opened up. You once again take up the role of a night guard, with brand new game mechanics to fight against your new cast of animatronic threats. However, just like the previous game, there needs to be some type of guide so the player can learn how to fight against this large cast of animatronics. So on the first night, we hear an incredibly familiar voice.
Hello? Hello and welcome to your new summer job at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I'm here to talk you through some of the things you can expect to see during your first week here and to help you get started down this new and exciting career path.
Calling this a surprise is an understatement. Somehow, Phone Guy is back in action and sounds completely fine after his supposed death in the previous game. How in the heck is this possible? Well, that answer is given to us at the end of the game. When we beat the main 5 nights, we receive a paper check made out to Jeremy Fitzgerald, the new night guard we're playing as. What's special about this check is, unlike the previous game, it actually has a date labeled, November 12th, 1987. Considering Phone Guy mentioned the bite of 87 in the previous game in reference to a past event, that means that Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is not later in the timeline, it's earlier. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is a prequel to Five Nights at Freddy's 1. The reason I'm telling you this now and not after we've listened to the calls is because this game being a prequel plays heavily into Phone Guy's character and how his behavior in this game starkly contrasts his behavior in the previous game. Knowing this game is a prequel from the get-go makes the calls easier to understand in terms of character progression. This game also has the most Phone Guy calls out of any other game in the series, so let's jump into them and let him continue on, shall we?
Now, I want you to forget anything you may have heard about the old location, some people still have a somewhat negative impression of the company. That old restaurant was kind of left to rot for quite a while, but I want to reassure you, Fazbear Entertainment is committed to family fun and above all, safety.
The first major thing I notice is that Phone Guy is much calmer than he is in his calls from FNAF 1. The stuttering and nervous tone is absent, and he overall sounds a lot more professional. It also gives us another new piece of info that will be expanded on in later entries. The Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from FNAF 2 is not the original location. There was an older location that came before them, and it too had something bad happen before it was shut down. I guess this pizza chain can't catch a break.
They've spent a small fortune on these new animatronics. Facial recognition, advanced mobility. They even let them walk around during the day. Isn't that neat? But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away. Heck, we should be paying them to guard you.
Phone Guy continues on to talk about the brand new animatronics in the FNAF 2 establishment. This line has been famously nicknamed the Toy Animatronics. These are cuter and friendlier versions of the original Freddy characters. To top it all off, they have high-tech facial recognition and even more mobility than the originals. Guess that means our new night guard Jeremy should be safe, right?
Now that being said, no new system is without its kinks.
There it is.
You're only the second guard to work at that location. The first guy finished his week, but complained about conditions. We switched him over to the day shift. So, hey, lucky you, right? Mainly he expressed concern that certain characters seemed to move around at night and even attempted to get into his office. Now, from what we know, that should be impossible. That restaurant should be the safest place on Earth. So while our engineers don't really have an explanation for this, the working theory is that the robots were never given a proper night mode. So when it gets quiet, they think they're in the wrong room. So then they go try to find where the people are, and in this case, that's your office.
This is interesting to me. In the original FNAF game, it's clear Phone Guy knows that the characters free roam at night and that they're highly dangerous to be around. However, in this game, he seems to wholeheartedly believe that the animatronics are just glitching out, and this tells us two things. The first is that Phone Guy hasn't experienced what's going on during the night shift, at least not yet. This is probably why he sounds so calm. He doesn't recognize the severity and danger these animatronics pose to the night staff. The second is that it's it's pretty likely Fazbear Entertainment also believes this working theory. They genuinely believe that these animatronics have some problems in their code, which is why they still keep them active during the day. However, considering the fact that they still try to open a new restaurant in the future after the disappearances at their previous locations, I don't think they would change much if they did know about the animatronic hauntings.
So our temporary solution is this. There's a music box over by the prize counter, and it's rigged to be wound up remotely. So just every once in a while, switch over to the prize counter video feed and wind it up for a few seconds. It doesn't seem to affect all of the animatronics, but it does affect one of them. And as for the rest of them, we have an even easier solution. You see, there may be a minor glitch in the system, something about robots seeing you as an endoskeleton without a costume on and wanting to stuff you into a suit. So hey, we've given you an empty Freddy Fazbear head. Problem solved. You can put it on any time and leave it on for as long as you want. Eventually anything that wandered in will wander back out.
Unlike the first game, Phone Guy actually does a really good job explaining the mechanics at your disposal. The music box is your main way of dealing with the puppet, a marionette-looking animatronic that resides behind the prize counter. The only way you can keep it at bay is by repeatedly going back to the prize counter camera and holding down the button to wind the box. This is one of my personal favorite mechanics, as that constant timer ticking down gives a sense of urgency to the player. It forces you to try and memorize how much time is left when you're balancing everything else. A little detail I like is that the music box won't wind down until Phone Guy mentions it during the call, roughly around 2 AM. I'm glad this is built into the game so new players don't get immediately blindsided by an early puppet activation. The mask, meanwhile, is your way of dealing with basically everything else. Putting it on when one of the animatronics are either in front of you or in the vents will make them recognize you as another animatronic. In due time, they'll leave your office and wander somewhere else. Flipping the mask will limit your sight and make you unable to flip up the monitor to wind the box, so finding a balance between the two is super important. In terms of explaining how the game works, the first call is much more concise, and in terms of why, it's probably because Phone Guy doesn't have to try and hide anything in this game. He does mention how the animatronics might think you're an endoskeleton without a costume, but that's a footnote, not the real reason why this is happening. To him and Fazbear Entertainment, these violent tendencies are glitches in the system. Judging from the fact that the previous night guard still works at the establishment and was transferred to the day shift, we could assume nobody has died because of these animatronics, unlike the animatronics from the previous game. In the future of FNAF 1, these animatronics have been maiming people for so long that Phone Guy is a nervous wreck, desperately trying to reassure his successor despite the obvious danger. But this is before those incidents, before the deaths, before the bite of 87. Right now, Phone Guy is just an ordinary Fazbear employee, talking to a new recruit about how to do his job. No secrets, no nervousness, just honesty.
Something else worth mentioning is kind of the quirky modern design of the building. You may have noticed there are no doors for you to close. But hey, you have lights, and even though your flashlight can run out of power, the building cannot. So don't worry about the place going dark.
Once again, he gives concise and helpful information. While we may not have the doors anymore, the flashlight and vent lights are more than enough considering we also have the mask to deal with the animatronic onslaught.
Well, I think that's it. You should be golden. Check the lights, put on the Freddy head if you need to, keep the music box wound up, piece of cake. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Overall, Phone Guy's first call in 1987 is 10 times better at being a proper tutorial than the one in the future. While the first call in FNAF 1 was better at setting up the ambiance, this one is so much better at helping the player learn the game's mechanics. But that's because the uneasiness of the first game came with the unsafe environment. The uneasiness in this game comes with the fact that we know these things are dangerous, but nobody else does. The first night of FNAF 2 isn't too difficult. You're only dealing with the toy animatronics tonight, so all you have to do is keep the music box wound up and flip on the mask when an animatronic is near. As long as you're attentive, you should win easily. After you beat the first night, you'll experience a short creepy cutscene, and then you'll immediately be launched into the next night. This next call we'll listen to is actually tied with the Night 3 call of this game for being my favorite of the entire series.
Hello? See, I told you your first night wouldn't be a problem. You're a natural.
Something I immediately like about this call is the phrasing. In FNAF 1, Phone Guy doesn't really give any assurance or praise to Mike after he survives the first couple of nights. In Night 3 specifically, the first thing he blurts out is, "Most people don't survive this long." Not very good words of encouragement. In FNAF 2, however, Phone Guy gives Jeremy a bit of praise and reassurance. The way he calls him a natural with such a proud tone to his voice warms my heart. It gives off such fatherly vibes.
By now, I'm sure you've noticed the older models sitting in the back room. Those are from the previous location, and we just use them for parts now. The idea at first was to repair them. They even started retrofitting them with some of the newer technology, but they were just so ugly, and the smell. So the company decided to just go in a whole new direction and make them super kid-friendly. Those older ones shouldn't be able to walk around, but if they do, the whole Freddy head trick should work on them too, so whatever.
This is our introduction to the other half of the threats we have to face in FNAF 2, the withered animatronics. The versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy from the old location Phone Guy mentioned in the previous call are all stationed in the parts and service room of the restaurant, lying in ruin. After being used for parts, they've become withered down, missing hands or face in Bonnie's situation. That means the threats you have to face has now been upped from 6 to 10 if you count the puppet. While most of them can be dealt with by using the mask, there is one outlier.
I loved those old characters. Did you ever see Foxy the Pirate? Oh wait, Foxy. Oh yeah, Foxy. Hey listen, that one was always a bit twitchy. I'm not sure if the Freddy head trick will work on Foxy. If for some reason he activates during the night, and you see him standing at the far end of the hall, just flash your light at him from time to time. Those older models would always get disoriented with bright light. It would cause a system restart or something. Come to think of it, you might want to try that on any room where something undesirable might be. It might hold them in place for a few seconds. That glitch might have carried over to the newer models too.
And now we learn about the final mechanic that this game has to offer, that being Foxy. Foxy is the only other animatronic in the game to have a mechanic unique to him, and he's the reason why this game is considered so difficult. If Foxy appears in your hallway, you have to constantly flash your light to make him go away, which can quickly use up your battery power in your flashlight. Balancing Foxy, the music box, and the mask is the main gameplay loop of FNAF 2. If you can find a way to balance all three of these things at once, then you have fully mastered the game. It all comes down to reaction time and planning ahead. When it comes to character, however, we actually got to learn something completely new about Phone Guy. Foxy the Pirate is his favorite. I really like how for a moment he was reminiscing about the classic Freddy's characters, maybe some happy memories from when he was a kid, most likely revolving around Foxy, and then remembered, "Aw nuts, Foxy." This lines up with him singling out Foxy on night 2 of the first game, being almost a direct parallel. In both nights, Foxy is introduced as an antagonist, he gets a special call out in the call for that night, and has a unique mechanic that you have to deal with very differently than the other animatronics. It's actually pretty sad to look back on the previous game, because Phone Guy doesn't even call Foxy by his name during that call. The animatronics were trying to kill him at that point, so it's very likely that the attachment he felt toward them was slowly starting to run thin as those nights went on.
One more thing, don't forget the music box. I'll be honest, I never liked that puppet thing. It's always thinking, and it can go anywhere. I don't think the Freddy mask will fool us, so just don't forget the music box.
The last part of this call tells us something else about the Phone Guy and about the puppet. Unlike the other animatronics, which again, Phone Guy has most likely not seen acting violent towards the staff, he is uncomfortable around the puppet specifically. It's a very odd choice of words to say that it's always thinking. I wouldn't describe any mindless machine as something that thinks. Of course, we know that the puppet is haunted by the first child William Afton ever killed, his business partner Henry's daughter, Charlie. Phone Guy's assessment during this call is meant to be our first clue on the puppet being way more than what it seems to be, and would eventually lead to it becoming a major part of the series' history.
Anyway, I'm sure it won't be a problem. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
I like how even though the ending of this call is abrupt, it doesn't feel as abrupt as the calls in the previous game. Post Night 1, all of the FNAF 1 calls don't really flow to their ending naturally, and a large part of that is because of Phone Guy's nervous, almost manic state of mind. But in this game, it's pure awkwardness. It's pretty hard not to sound like a weirdo after telling your coworkers that you think one of the animatronics can think. With this call, all of the mechanics of FNAF 2 have been fully explained. All of the animatronics, save for Foxy and the puppet, all enter your office in the same way, and can all be repelled by popping on the Freddy mask. Because of this, all of the calls from now on will be focused on giving cryptic lore that'll be expanded on later in the series, and show Phone Guy's slow transition into the nervous voice on the phone we all know and love. After another creepy cutscene, Night 3 starts up and we are treated to another call.
Hello? See, I told you wouldn't have any problems. Did, Foxy ever appear in the hallway? Probably not. I was just curious.
Phone Guy immediately opens up the call by asking if Foxy was in the hallway, and I choose to read this as Phone Guy being hopeful that Foxy may still be functioning. Since he hasn't worked a night shift, he most likely found out about Foxy's aversion to light from the previous night guard. So I like to think he's hopeful that his favorite animatronic may still be functional.
Like I said, he was always my favorite. They tried to remake Foxy, you know? They thought the first one was too scary, so they redesigned him to be more kid-friendly and put him in Kids Cove to keep the toddlers entertained, you know. But kids these days just can't keep their hands to themselves. The staff literally had to put Foxy back together at the end of every shift. Eventually they just stopped trying and left him as some kind of take-apart, put-back-together attraction. Now he's just a mess of parts. I think the employees refer to him as just the Mangle.
This explains why the supposed toy Foxy looks like this abomination. The Mangle is definitely one of the most iconic characters in the series, and it's easy to see why. The white and pink colors of the outer shell clashing against the exposed innards of the metal endoskeleton make for a striking visual. It perfectly showcases the original idea of FNAF, kid-friendly animatronics being turned into terrifying monsters. But in universe, it also showcases some of the early flaws of Fazbear Entertainment as a company, flaws that would continue to be present in its future. The idea of an animatronic being easily ripped apart by children and having to be put back together at the end of every day is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. If these are state-of-the-art machines, then they shouldn't come apart super easily, especially if it's a toddler doing it. I think the original idea was to have the old animatronics be retrofitted, and the smell of the old suits probably deterred them from going in that direction. But I also think Fazbear Entertainment saw the possibility of cutting costs by making the toy animatronics out of cheaper, more plastic-based parts, and using parts of the original metal animatronics to save on even more of the potential costs. The issue is, these animatronics are much more brittle than the originals. This could explain why Mangle is so easily ripped apart by kids, why Toy Chica's beak can be detached from her face, and why all of the animatronics' eyes can go completely dark, almost like the whites of their eyes fall out. It's obvious that Phone Guy isn't really a fan of the newer animatronics, especially the new Foxy. He's an old head, and you know what? I respect that. He likes the originals better, and the new versions have been nothing but trouble for the staff. Speaking of being trouble, Phone Guy gives us some important info in this next part.
Oh hey, before I go, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these local stories come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on out there, however tragic it may be, has nothing to do with our establishment. It's just all rumor and speculation, people trying to make a buck, you know. Our guard during the day has reported nothing unusual, and he's on watch from opening till close.
There is a lot to dissect here, so let's start with what's actually being said. Apparently, there are some rumors going around about something involving Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We aren't told exactly what the rumors are about yet, but we can gather from the way Phone Guy talks about them that they're anything but good. He tells us that the things that are going on out there have nothing to do with the establishment. The way he says this sounds genuine, like he actually believes that these are just rumors. There's no stuttering, no pauses. He sounds sure of himself. I don't think this is Phone Guy speaking on behalf of Fazbear Entertainment. I think this is his thoughts. That means that, realizing it or not, he's already started becoming more like the Phone Guy we've seen in the future. Just like in FNAF 1, Phone Guy is minimizing, though this is in a very small way. These are just rumors at this point without any hard evidence to back it up. But without realizing it, he's downplaying something very serious that might be happening behind the scenes, and he's gonna pay for that later.
Okay, well anyway, hang in there and I'll talk with you tomorrow.
And that's pretty much all we can get from this call. As we move into the next section, we'll watch Phone Guy's fall as he becomes much more in line with the voice we're used to listening to. From this point on, we're going to notice a deterioration of the professional, truthful Phone Guy we've seen in this game. Those rumors were the writing on the wall, and this next call only confirms our fears.
Hello? Hey there, Night 4. I told you to get the hang of it.
Small note, but I do like that Phone Guy is still very supportive of Jeremy and his success in his first week, even now.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may end up having to close for a few days, I don't know. I want to emphasize, though, that it's really just a precaution. Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoing. These things happen sometimes. It'll all get sorted out in a few days. Just keep an eye on things and I'll keep you posted.
Did you notice a change? Phone Guy is once again minimizing, only this is a lot worse than the night before. He's still giving Jeremy most of the information, telling him about the ongoing investigation and trying to ease his mind. But did you notice what he didn't tell him? What the investigation was actually about? Phone Guy doesn't tell Jeremy what's really going on. He dances around the topic, just like he does with the previous accidents at Freddy Fazbear's in FNAF 1. On top of that, he also starts to throw in small, robotic answers like Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoings. He doesn't say the company doesn't think anything is wrong, like you would when you're talking to your coworker. He says it like he's being interviewed, like he's already given that answer multiple times before and it slipped into this conversation, like he was on autopilot. It's more than likely he's been answering questions from the authorities during the day shift and this is how management told him to answer them. It does still seem like he's on Jeremy's side, however, because he does say he'll keep him posted on future matters. He hasn't gone fully off the deep end yet, but things only get worse as the call continues.
Just as a side note though, try to avoid eye contact with any of the animatronics tonight if you can. Someone may have tampered with their facial recognition systems, we're not sure. But the characters have been acting very unusual, almost aggressive toward the staff. They interact with the kids just fine, but when they encounter an adult, they just stare.
Well, that's a red flag. I think this is meant to indicate that, whether Phone Guy and Fazbear Entertainment know it or not, the animatronics are becoming more outwardly hostile towards people. I don't necessarily think that the toys are haunted with the souls of the children. It's a bit unclear if the toys ever had any children's souls in them. The second FNAF movie even implies that Charlotte is the only ghost haunting any of the animatronics in the second game. I think the most likely theory, to me anyway, is that the toy animatronics were never haunted. Afton just reprogrammed their facial recognition software to target all adults rather than just the felons and predators. The withered animatronics, however, make way more sense to have the body stuffed into. They have way more metal inside than plastic. They're kept far away from prying eyes so nobody would investigate them for a while, and they shouldn't be active. I think it's actually pretty likely that the withered animatronics have had souls bound to them from the second night onwards, which explains why they would still be able to function even without hands, arms, or even a face. Regardless, Phone Guy at the very least is noticing a change with the animatronics, and he's starting to get a lot more cautious and a lot more nervous as the week goes on.
Anyway, hang tight, it'll all pass. Good night.
As you can see, Phone Guy has begun to change into the scared corporate apologist we see in the previous game. His minimizing is getting worse, his tone is becoming more nervous, and we even get his first stumble in this call. This part to be exact.
We may end up having to close for a few days, I don't know.
You can tell that he is much more uncomfortable during that line specifically too, like he's not certain if the restaurant will be closed for a few days, a few weeks, or maybe more. It's also the very first time he's stumbled over his words. He's been very clear up until now. Regardless, that's all we can take from this call. The Night 5 phone call is where things really amp up, so let's move into the next section, shall we? The end of the week is here. It's time for night 5. Let's take a listen to the phone call.
Oh, hey, good job, night 5. Keep a close eye on things tonight, okay? From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
Things have gone from bad to worse. Apparently something, or someone, was connected to the investigation, which caused authorities to put the building on lockdown. Not only that, but it seems like the previous night guard who was moved to the day shift has suddenly left his position. What a strange coincidence. Of course, we know this is most likely William Afton, who took the night guard position and switched to the day shift, most likely so he could find more targets and get more remnant. At the very least, Phone Guy is still trying to be supportive where he can. He still tells Jeremy that he's doing a good job, but you could really tell he's extremely stressed out and worried.
We don't have a replacement for your shift yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Freddy's Family Diner or something like that. It was closed for years, though. I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
This is also where Phone Guy mentions the original restaurant, the old location that was mentioned in this game's Night 1 call. We now know that the original Freddy's location was actually called Fredbear's Family Diner and has been closed for years. The ironic thing about this line, of course, is that one of those said owners is Afton, the guy that's been causing all these problems in the present. The other owner was a man by the name of Henry Emily, who's probably the guy that they're trying to track down. The reason why I'm focusing on this is because while Phone Guy isn't willing to actually talk about the rumors or what's really going on, he is telling Jeremy everything else that's happening behind the scenes. Unlike in the first game, Phone Guy is still telling the truth. He's still trying to be a good boss and tell his employees what's going on. The only problem is he either isn't willing or can't divulge the important information, which means we only have bits and pieces to go off of for what's really going on.
So just get through one more night. Hang in there. Good night.
The way I see Phone Guy's transformation in the second game is similar to how we view different phases of the moon. Phone Guy starts out on the first night as a new moon. He's willing to give us as much information as he's allowed to disclose. He's cordial and professional, and he's very calm and collected. By the time of the third and fourth calls, Phone Guy is now a first quarter. He's still trying to be professional and is willing to give out as much information as he can, but he's a lot more nervous and is held back by falling into that minimizer behavior we see in FNAF 1. And as we move into the Night 6 call, the final call for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, we'll see him become a full moon. I'm going to let you listen to the whole call. Here it is.
Hello. What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. Listen, just finish your shift. It's safer than trying to leave in the middle of the night. We have one more event scheduled for tomorrow, a birthday. You'll be on day shift. Wear your uniform. Stay close to the animatronics and make sure they don't hurt anyone, okay? For now, just make it through the night. When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take the night shift myself. Okay, good night, and good luck.
In this call, we could see that Phone Guy has fully transitioned into how he acts during the events of FNAF 1. He is a nervous mess, constantly stuttering over his words. He sounds almost dazed as he attempts to tell Jeremy about what's happened, even though almost all of the details are still barred off from mentioning. He says that someone used one of the spare suits, a yellow one, and now none of them are acting right. By now, the authorities have most likely figured out that William Afton, posing as a night guard turned day shift security guard, is responsible for the disappearances of at least 5 children. He did all of this by using a yellow suit that we'll become much more accustomed with in the next game. But oddly, Phone Guy still hasn't fully turned into who he is in the previous game. While he does tell Jeremy to finish his shift, even though he's not supposed to be there, he's saying this because he doesn't want him to get hurt. By now he knows that the animatronics are actively dangerous and are hostile towards adults specifically. He could have just told Jeremy to get out of there, as he shouldn't be paid on company time. That would be the Fazbear Entertainment thing to do, to save a buck wherever possible, and something that Phone Guy would most likely do if this was the first game. But instead, he prioritized Jeremy's safety. He survived 5 nights against these animatronics already. He should be able to handle one more. What does suck though is that he immediately tells him that he needs to work another shift right after this one. But I also think this says a lot about how much he trusts this night guard. From Phone Guy's perspective, Jeremy is someone who has been repelling these animatronics for a week straight, surviving long hours against them while making minimum wage. If anyone should be around the animatronics for the final event, it's him. Phone Guy has shown time and time again that he cares about how these characters are perceived by the children. He cares about the impact Freddy Fazbear's Pizza as an experience is for the children. It's obvious that Fazbear Entertainment is a greedy company. That's why they're still doing one more event even though there's a disappearance investigation going on. But Phone Guy wants to preserve the magic of Freddy's the best he can, so he entrusts this to his most loyal and equipped employee, someone who has actively fought against these animatronics. Unfortunately, it's more than likely that wasn't what actually happened. After beating the night, Jeremy received a check for an extra $20.10. Of course, the check is issued for the day after the previous check was issued, November 13th, 1987. Next to the check, we can read a newspaper about how the new animatronics at Freddy's will be scrapped and the old withered ones will be held onto, setting up their return in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. We also get a brief quote from the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, talking about how this is a minor setback, but they hope to reopen someday. So, what happened? Why did Phone Guy say that the place would only be closed down for a few days, only for them to pivot into permanent closure after one day? Well, I think that was originally the case. They did plan to close for only a few days and reopen once the investigation had been cleared. But something happened during that final birthday party, something that irreversibly altered the lives of so many people, something that ruined Fazbear Entertainment's reputation for years, something they couldn't just sweep under the rug. That being, of course, the bite of '87. The most popular theory of the fandom when it comes to the bite is that it happens on November 13th, 1987, and Jeremy Fitzgerald is the victim. Jeremy is not seen in any FNAF media after the second game, and his disappearance could be easily explained by this theory. There are a lot of options when it comes to who actually performed the bite itself. Some say it was Withered Foxy, others say it was Toy Chica, and there was even a fan game series called Pop Goes that was completely centered around the theory that Toy Bonnie performed the bite. But the most popular suspect by far, and the one I believe to be most likely, is Mangle. Mangle was the only animatronic to be mentioned in the phone calls that doesn't have a unique mechanic like Foxy or the puppet. Considering that he's situated in Pirate's Cove, and there's a party table, it's more than likely that she's the one who caused the bite during this final birthday event. In truth, it doesn't really matter which of the animatronics bit Jeremy. What matters are the repercussions of what happened. After the bite, Fazbear Entertainment was put in an awful position. First the disappearances of 5 children, now a maiming by one of their animatronic entertainers. What's worse is that this was in front of a live audience, live witnesses. The only option was to abandon the rebrand completely and try again in a few years. To Fazbear Entertainment, it was a minor setback, but to Phone Guy, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Jeremy was a fellow employee that Phone Guy actively supported, one that he called every night and talked with even if he didn't reply. He was someone that worked so hard for so little and got maimed in the process. Phone Guy always told Jeremy everything he was allowed to say. He chatted with him about his favorite characters and gave him helpful information. Considering he never spoke back, it's hard to say if they had a true friendship, but at the very least, it was a mentorship. Now his protege has been permanently maimed, yet somehow still alive. This is what changed Phone Guy into who he is in the first game. He didn't become a full moon during the Night 6 call, he became a full moon after the bite of 87 on the 6th day. By the time of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, he's fully transitioned into the character we know better. Extremely skittish and nervous, always stuttering over his own words, downplaying the dangers present, and trying to sometimes comfort the night guard, but only succeeding in making things more uncomfortable. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 expanded Phone Guy's character immensely. What started as a dishonest co-worker who hid his true darkness behind his place of work has now become a tragic story of trauma. There was a point in time where Phone Guy was a great employee, when he was excited about working at Freddy's and loved the characters and atmosphere and the people he worked with. But after that short time at the new Freddy's location in 1987, his entire demeanor changed. He grew to be a nervous wreck that downplays the dangers of what's happening, unintentionally tricking future employees to the hell he and many others have experienced. FNAF 2 masterfully expanded on his character, but we haven't finished hearing him speak just yet, because we'll hear more from him in the next game. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is what many consider to be the best FNAF game story-wise. This was originally supposed to be the final game in the series, so of course it was made to have a sense of finality. This was the game that brought us face to face with the monster of Freddy's, and what I would say has become the most stress-inducing game the series has produced. Of course, now that FNAF is a multimedia series with even more content to expand the characters and events, FNAF 3 is often looked back on as a high point instead of an ending. It has now been 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has closed down, and in that time, the restaurant chain and the disappearances that occurred have become local legend. It's unclear if the year this takes place in is 2015 or 2023, but regardless, a new attraction at a local amusement park based on the ghost stories of Freddy's has opened up, Fazbear's Fright. You once again take on the role of a night guard, except this time, you're playing a part. The character you're playing as is actually an actor that's supposed to be a part of the Fazbear's Fright experience. This is all told to you through a brand new voice on the phone, which you can hear here.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time.
This voice is presumably the man who set up the Fazbear's Fright attraction. Like Phone Guy originally, he goes unnamed in this game, but the fanbase have decided to affectionately name him the Phone Dude, a name that would be adopted in later reappearances. Like Phone Guy, he was also voiced by the series creator, Scott Cawthon. We aren't going to focus much on Phone Dude's character. He doesn't appear for long in this game, and this is a Phone Guy video after all. While it would be short, I'm not against doing a video on Phone Dude in the future. Let me know if this is something you guys would watch. Regardless, Phone Dude talks to you during your first night of the week, where nothing really happens. There are no antagonists on this night. It's simply here to let you get comfortable with the new layout and mechanics. For this night, you can just relax and take in what Phone Dude is telling you. He mostly talks about how they're still looking for something big to put into the attraction, something besides flashing lights and spooky props. When the second night opens up, Phone Dude calls us back with some much more interesting stuff. He talks about how he found some vintage audio training cassettes, ones that he describes as prehistoric. He also says this.
But I have an even better surprise for you. You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
He ends the call very shortly after this, and that's the last we would hear of Phone Dude. He doesn't call back at any point in the series. Instead, from night 2 onward, we are treated once again to a very familiar voice.
Hello? Welcome to your new career as a performer/entertainer for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
The audio cassettes that Phone Dude found contained the voice of no one other than our dear friend, the Phone Guy. Considering that Phone Dude called these tapes prehistoric, it's pretty likely that these tapes were recorded a long time ago. In fact, they were most likely recorded before 1987. Since FNAF 3 was meant to be the finale of the story, it only makes sense to also give us a bit of closure on Phone Guy's story. His arc actually works in reverse. The first game shows us the ending, the second game shows the transition, and the third game shows who he was before everything happened. So, with that setup, let's take a listen to Phone Guy's first ever training tape and technically his first ever message in the story.
These tapes will provide you with much needed information on how to handle /climb into /climb out of mascot costumes. Right now we have 2 specially designed suits that double as both animatronic and suit. So please pay close attention while learning how to operate these suits, as accidents, /injuries, /deaths, /irreparable and grotesque maimings can occur.
As we can hear, these tapes are meant to serve as a guide on how to wear the performer suits at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Not only that, but 2 of the suits can double as an animatronic and as a suit. What I notice about Phone Guy, however, is that he sounds extremely professional. Of course, this makes sense. Unlike the calls and voice recordings in the previous games, these are meant to be professional tutorial tapes. His job is to give the listener all of the information he has when it comes to staying safe when operating these suits, so professionalism is needed.
First, we will discuss how to operate the mascots when they are in animatronic form. For ease of operation, the animatronics are set to turn and walk towards sound cues. This is an easy and hands-free approach to making sure the animatronics stay where the children are for maximum entertainment / crowd-pleasing value.
This little bit of information is actually meant to serve as a tutorial for how to play the game, because that thing Phone Dude found is now active. This is Springtrap, by far the most iconic and popular animatronic of the entire franchise. He'll be your main, and technically only, threat for the rest of the game. As you can probably put together considering these tapes and the animatronic were found at the same time, Springtrap is one of these very suits that can double as both a mascot and an animatronic. Because of that, your main way of fighting Springtrap is by using audio lures. You can play the sounds of a child's laugh, Balloon Boys to be exact, in different rooms to lure Springtrap away from your office. However, while you do this, you're still trying to manage the faulty wiring of the building, and you're trying to fight against the phantom animatronics. These are ghostly hallucinations that won't kill you, but will make your job that much more difficult. If you get jump scared, they'll screw up the building's ventilation and potentially make you lose the audio and video for your cameras. This little moment in the call is really the only tutorial that Phone Guy supplies in FNAF 3. It's kinda crazy that years after his death, he's still giving tips on how to fight these animatronics.
To change the animatronics to suit mode, insert and turn firmly the hand crank provided by the manufacturer. Turning the crank will recoil and compress the animatronic parts around the sides of the suit, providing room to climb inside. Please make sure the spring locks are fastened tight to ensure the animatronic devices remain fixed. We will cover this in more detail in tomorrow's session.
Phone Guy then winds down the first cassette by giving a brief introduction on how to change the animatronic suit hybrid into suit mode. I find the way this part is delivered really interesting, because it sounds like he's reading this off of a page. Most of the call sounds very professional, but this part in particular makes me think that he's finding out all of this information for the first time. Listen to this line in particular.
Insert and turn firmly the hand crank provided by the manufacturer.
He sounds like he's finding this all out for the first time, almost like he's thinking to himself, so that's how they get the spring locks pushed back. This tells me that Phone Guy himself never actually wore either of these spring lock suits, he's just making the tutorial cassettes. Though that does raise the question of why he's the one doing the tapes if he has no experience with the suits beforehand. Maybe Fazbear Entertainment realized he had a good speaking voice and asked him to make the tapes? Phone Guy wraps up the first cassette tape with this iconic quote.
Remember to smile, you are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
This quote would become one of the most popular lines in the entire series, representing the vibes of Fazbear Entertainment as a company, corporate forced happiness. Regardless, our reintroduction to Phone Guy is a bit lackluster, but that kinda makes sense all things considered. He doesn't show off a lot of character in this call because he's recording these cassettes to be used by performers operating highly dangerous suits. He has to be professional and to the point. I do like how the main mechanic of FNAF 3 is slipped into the tape, however. This is something I didn't even realize until years after the game has come out. It's a very natural way to give the player some discrete information, and for Phone Guy to still have his original role as the guide and tutorial. That's all we can take away from this first tape, so let's move on to the next. After successfully fending off Springtrap to beat Night 2, Night 3 immediately opens up with another one of the training cassette tapes. Like I said, Phone Dude never calls us again for the rest of the game. We'll only be hearing Phone Guy's voice from now on.
Hello. For today's lesson, we will be continuing our training on proper suit handling techniques.
Small side note, but I love that the hello thing Phone Guy does just seems ingrained into him. It made sense with the messages and calls, but these are training tapes. He doesn't have to say hi at the beginning of each one. I'm glad he still does it. It's one of his signature character details, but it is a little silly that it's in these tutorial tapes.
When using an animatronic as a suit, please ensure that the animatronic parts are tightly compressed and fastened by the spring locks located around the inside of the suit. It may take a few moments to position your head and torso between these parts in a manner where you can move and speak. Try not to nudge or press against any of the spring locks inside the suit. Do not touch the spring locks at any time. Do not breathe on the spring locks, as moisture may loosen them and cause them to break loose. In the case that the spring locks come loose while you are wearing a suit, please try to maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer experience.
And now we see why we haven't heard of any animatronic suit hybrids in the previous games. These things are incredibly dangerous. Once you get inside, these things are basically a death trap. The spring locks that hold the wiring and metal bits in place are fragile to a point where you can't touch or even breathe on them. One false move and the spring locks will break loose and you'll be crushed inside the suit. Phone Guy has to tell you to move into another room so people won't watch you bleed out. It's morbid and a tiny bit funny at how corporate it feels.
As always, if there is ever an emergency, please go to the designated safe room. Every location is built with one extra room that is not included in the digital map layouts programmed into the animatronics or security system. This room is hidden to customers, invisible to animatronics, and is always off camera.
Near the end of the tape, Phone Guy mentions how if there is an emergency, every Fazbear building is built with an extra room, a safe room. I find it interesting that these rooms are not only invisible to animatronics, but they also are not shown on the cameras. That means that both the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1987 and the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from the first game both had a safe room that we didn't know about. Regardless, Phone Guy wraps up the recording in the same way he did for the last one.
As always, remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Out of all the cassettes we listened to, this one has Phone Guy at his most professional. He's talking about information that could mean life or death to whoever is wearing the spring-lock suit, so his tone and delivery reflect that. He's not really showing any character or personality here because it's simply a training tape. However, this will subtly change as we move into the next section, where we will cover the rest of the tapes in FNAF 3. From Night 4 onwards, the cassettes will progressively be much shorter in length. This is due to the later nights of FNAF 3 being incredibly difficult, so focusing on fending off Springtrap takes priority. Despite these being shorter, we do still have plenty of content to analyze, so let's start up the next tape.
Hello. There's been a slight change of company policy concerning use of the suit. Don't.
I'm sorry. I don't know why, but that line always makes me laugh even now. This line was definitely not in the script. That's just Phone Guy being blunt. Alright, we can continue.
After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, the company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees. Safety is top priority at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which is why the classic suits are being retired to an appropriate location while being looked at by our technicians.
I think the thing that stands out in this section the most is the mention of a sister location. Five Nights at Freddy's sister location is of course the 5th game in the mainline series, and focuses on a different group of animatronics made by a different company known as Afton Robotics, created by the one and only William Afton. In sister location, there is a section of gameplay where Michael, the main character, gets stuffed into a spring-lock suit and has to try and survive against the faulty wiring. It's more than likely that the sister location that's being mentioned in the tape is Circus Baby's Pizza World, and the multiple spring-lock failures are one of the reasons why it shut down. This resulted in the classic spring-lock suits being retired across all locations, which gives us a reason as to why we never saw or heard of one in the previous games.
Until replacements arrive, you will be expected to wear the temporary costumes provided to you. Keep in mind that they were found on very short notice, so questions about appropriateness/relevance should be deflected.
What these temporary costumes Phone Guy mentions could be is a bit unclear, even now, but there are two options for what they may be. These could either be the mediocre Melodies, a set of unpopular Freddy's characters seen most famously in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night, or they could be the many different mascot suits seen throughout Murray's costume manor in Secret of the Mimic. There is evidence in the FNAF 3 retro minigames that the mediocres are most likely what Phone Guy is talking about, but the Murray costumes are actual plush mascot costumes while the mediocre Melodies are only seen as face masks. I personally believe Phone Guy is talking about the Murray costumes here. It makes the most sense.
I repeat, the classic suits are not to be touched, activated, or worn. That being said, we are free of liability. Do as you wish.
This is an interesting little character moment for Phone Guy, as he just did something that he would end up doing a lot more in the future. In the first two games, Phone Guy was repeatedly used as a mouthpiece to clear Fazbear Entertainment of any liability when it comes to injured employees. It all definitely came from corporate, as most of what he says are greetings from the company or answers Phone Guy has given to say to the police. This is a very small footnote in the tape, but it's the first recorded time that Phone Guy had to be used like this. It's something we would see him repeatedly do again in the future. But again, Phone Guy ends off the tape like he always does.
As always, remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
While it was brief, this tape showed an echo of what Phone Guy would be turned into by the time of FNAF 2, a mouthpiece for a company to clear their name of wrongdoings. Night 5's tape, on the other hand, offers some interesting context regarding the past incidents at Freddy's. Let's take a listen.
Hello? This is just a reminder of company policy concerning the safe room. The safe room is reserved for equipment and or other property not being currently used and as a backup safety location for employees only. This is not a break room. It should not be considered a place for employees to hide and or congregate. And under no circumstance should a customer ever be taken into this room and out of the main show area.
I don't know if you can tell, but this is the first tape where Phone Guy doesn't just sound stern, he sounds mad. Have you ever worked a job with a group chat, and when you mess something up, there's a text put out to all the other employees about how to properly do the thing you just messed up, usually starting with a "just a reminder" or something to that extent? That's what's happening here. This tape is referencing how William Afton lured his victims into the safe rooms in order to kill them away from prying eyes. The safe rooms are the perfect place to carry this out, since it's invisible to animatronics and cameras. Phone Guy, or someone else, most likely saw Afton sneak into the safe room at some point. Phone Guy specifically says that it's not a place to hide. So I think the other employees believed Afton was slacking off with some friend outside work, not being a murderous psycho. Otherwise, I think they would have reported him to the police. Phone Guy in particular is not happy about this. Remember, he loves his job, so finding out about a potential slacker avoiding their duties probably infuriates him. This is one of the most passive-aggressive messages I have ever seen. It shows a different side to Phone Guy and reveals that he's a lot more three-dimensional than you may think at first.
Management has also been made aware that the Spring Bonnie animatronic has been noticeably moved and would like to remind employees that this costume is not safe to wear under any circumstances.
And here's the big reveal. One of the classic Springlock suits mentioned in the previous tapes was known as Spring Bonnie. We actually see Spring Bonnie in one of the retro minigames, a dancing yellow rabbit that looks a lot like the purple Bonnie we're used to. Phone Guy mentions in FNAF 2 that someone used a spare yellow suit in the back of the establishment, and Springtrap is a withered yellow bunny animatronic with human gore strewn throughout. Combine this with the final minigame of FNAF 3 where we see Afton gets spring-locked, and I think you can see the connecting line. The Spring Bonnie Springlock hybrid was the yellow suit Afton used to lure children, and the away-from-camera safe room is how he got away with the murders. It's due to the incompetence of Fazbear Entertainment that Afton was able to get away with these crimes. The safe room was made so there would be no recorded proof of people bleeding out from the dangerous Springlock suits, and a psychopath took advantage of their negligence to get away with multiple homicides on their location. Afton. Of course, Phone Guy doesn't know about all of this yet. He only possibly finds out about these crimes in November of 1987, years after these tapes were made. Right now, he's just annoyed at an employee for potentially slacking off. Now, I do want to clarify that I don't think Phone Guy worked at Fredbear's Family Diner, the original location where the Spring Bonnie suit came from. He sounds like he doesn't know the name and place very well back when he was talking about it in FNAF 2. And remember, he was telling Jeremy the truth at every possible point he could. It wouldn't make sense that this would be one of his only lies. Regardless, he wraps up the tape like he has for all the previous ones.
Thank you, and remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
This was an interesting tape, as it gave those final few connecting threads that fully explained Afton's fate and how it ties into the main night's gameplay against Springtrap. But it also showed a lot more of Phone Guy's potential trauma, because if he did find out Afton was behind the murders, then I am certain he felt a little bit responsible in FNAF 2. He thought that he was disciplining an employee when recording this tape, not being on the cusp of uncovering Afton's crimes and saving so many future victims' lives. No wonder he's a nervous, worried mess in FNAF 1. We have one final call to look over. After beating the main 5 nights, instead of night 6, you unlock Nightmare Night. It pretty much functions like a normal night 6, only you have to beat it in order to get both the bad and true endings to the game. This night gives us our final and shortest tape of the whole lot. Let's take a listen.
Hello? This is just to inform all employees that due to budget restrictions, the previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one. Work crews will be here most of the day today, constructing a false wall over the old door face.
This final tape tells us about the aftermath of Afton's spring locking. The room he died in was boarded up so the company wouldn't have to deal with the legal ramifications. It actually worked out pretty perfectly, all things considered, as they got to get rid of the murderer and the room where the murder happened all at the same time, though I don't think they ever figured out that Afton was behind all the disappearances in the past.
Nothing is being taken out beforehand, so if you left anything inside, then it's your own fault. Management also requests that this room not be mentioned to family, friends, or insurance representatives.
That's another moment that always gets a giggle out of me. But still, once again, Phone Guy is being used as a mouthpiece for Fazbear Entertainment to keep them clean and away from any ramifications. It's almost funny how this will only continue to increase as time goes on. And that's really it. The ending of the tape is the same as all the others. In these 3 games, we listened to Phone Guy speak for 4 recorded messages, 6 live calls, and 5 trading cassette tapes, making for 15 pieces of dialogue in total. And that's, as of the time of me making this video, the final number. After Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we never hear a new message from this Phone Guy ever again. This is it, the end of his beginning and the beginning of his end. It's pretty fitting that his final line of the series is a dark reflection on what his fate ends up being.
Thanks again, and remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
As Five Nights at Freddy's 3 comes to an end, it feels as if it goes the same for the Phone Guy as well. The third game didn't really have that much that expanded on his character, but that was mostly because he was creating professional tutorial tapes, not one-on-one messages. We got some new character details, but not as much as we got in the other 2 games. This was mostly focused on foreshadowing his trauma and how Afton died. Honestly though, I'm alright with this. We already know who Phone Guy used to be. These tapes just showed us a tiny bit more on who he was professionally. We've seen his full transformation throughout these games, but that doesn't mean we're done just yet. In the next section, we'll go over all of the Phone Guy references and Easter eggs in the games that came out after FNAF 3, because there's way more than you would suspect. While FNAF 3 marked the end of Phone Guy's major role in the Five Nights at Freddy's games, this isn't the last time the series would bring him back or reference him. In fact, he would go on to be at least referenced in almost every single game of the series. The first time this happened would be in the game that came after Five Nights at Freddy's 3, that being Five Nights at Freddy's 4. FNAF 4 shook up the series' formula by having the gameplay section set in a bedroom instead of an office. Because of this, there was no way to have a voice on the phone as a tutorial. Instead, Instead, these big text boxes were used to instruct you on night 1. But if you look on the floor of the bedroom, you can see a blue plastic toy telephone calling back to Phone Guy. There's also a purple toy fan on top of one of the dressers to reference the metal fan present in the first 3 games. While this is a cute reference, that's not the only Easter egg. If you listen to the ambience of the room during your gameplay, you might hear some of this weird, garbled audio playing in the background. However, if you reverse the audio and change the pitch, it sounds a lot more familiar. This is Phone Guy's first ever call from FNAF 1, reused as a creepy background noise. So in a roundabout way, Phone Guy was technically in the first 4 FNAF games. Pretty cool. Technically debuting for the first time ever on the Analysis series, we next have FNAF World, the RPG spin-off game. In this game, you can discover a hidden area by listening to this glitched out version of Adventure Fredbear called The Flip Side, a pixelated glitchy hidden route to get to the other parts of the game. The Flip Side was named after what Phone Guy says at the end of the Night 3 call in FNAF 1.
Okay, I'll leave you to it. See you on the flip side.
And this wouldn't be the last time the series referenced this specific line either. In the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie, near the beginning, William Afton, under the guise of his alter ego, Steve Raglan, calls Mike before his first night as a night guard at Freddy's. During the call, he fulfills the same role as Phone Guy in the games by giving Mike the backstory of Freddy's and telling him about his duties. As he ends the call, he references Phone Guy's Night 3 call in FNAF 1.
I will catch you on the flip side.
Hopefully.
See you on the flip side.
Five Nights at Freddy's sister location and Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator do not have any direct references to Phone Guy, but you are helped out by an AI voice recording software known as Hand Unit. It basically takes up Phone Guy's role as being a tutorial for the player. Ultimate Custom Night, however, would be his most important appearance since the 3rd game. Phone Guy was chosen as one of the 50 antagonists you could fight against, giving us his first ever visual reference in the series, this blue phone with noise coming out of the speaker. This would also be the game that finally adopts the fan name as an official alias. As you can see when we hover over him, he is finally officially named Phone Guy. His mechanics are pretty simple. If he starts to call the office, you have to find the mute call button and press it before the call starts. If it does start, Phone Guy will make noise, causing noise-sensitive animatronics to become aggressive. The audio is all reused from previous FNAF games. This includes his Night 1, Night 2, and Night 3 messages from Five Nights at Freddy's 1, his Night 1 call from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and his Night 3 tape from Five Nights at Freddy's 3. The call noise will even change depending on which game the message comes from. I always liked that detail. I think it's fitting that Phone Guy is in this game. The plot of Ultimate Custom Night is that we are playing as William Afton going through an endless amount of awful nights, being tortured for all of the sins he committed for eternity. Phone Guy is a casualty of his crimes, so it's only right that his voice now haunts him. Phone Guy would return one last time in the first of the Steelwolf FNAF games, Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted. The game included recreations of the first 3 FNAF games as playable VR levels, including Phone Guy's audio reused for each night. The recreations also included an official 3D model of the phones from those games, technically giving us more visual representations for Phone Guy. In the credits, they would also refer to him as Phone Guy once again, crediting Scott Cawthon as his voice actor. Interestingly though, despite Phone Dude appearing in the game through reused audio, Scott is not credited with his voice, just Phone Guy's. Outside of the main series, however, a variant of the Phone Guy would also appear in the FNAF spin-off game Into the Pit, based on the Fazbear Fright story of the same name. This game is most definitely not canon to the mainline series, and because of that, I didn't want to focus all too much on this Phone Guy. He's portrayed by a different voice actor named Patrick Hickey Jr., and he does a really great job at mimicking Scott's line delivery.
Hello? Hello? Hey, I know you are doing great. And the animatronics aren't really under your responsibility, but I need to tell you something just in case, alright?
But unlike the calls in the original 3 games, there's not a lot of characterization that parallels the main series. He never talks about himself, and the calls are mostly a retread of previous messages, so we're going to breeze by this interpretation. And that's it. That's the most recent appearance of Phone Guy in the games. It's kind of incredible that he's been in so many future games even after his last proper appearance in FNAF 3. Unfortunately, there just hasn't been a way to include him in any of the plots of future stories. Phone Guy died in the very first game, and every appearance after this was during different points in Fazbear Entertainment's past. Unfortunately, the stories that could be told with him have already been told. After FNAF VR, it felt like there was nothing left they could possibly do with him. There's nothing left to explore. At least, that's what we all thought, because in the next section, we're going to be talking about one of the best things to come out of the series in recent time, and the reason I wanted to do this analysis in the first place. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, a couple years ago, Scott Cawthon launched a brand new Twitter page concerning all new news on the franchise. He also teased an entire week of content leading up to the release of the newest FNAF game at the time, Into the Pit. One of the things released was the first in a set of interactive Five Nights at Freddy's novels. These novels took inspiration from the Choose Your Own Adventure style of books, but with a FNAF twist. In a lot of ways, these books are treated more like games than they are novels, with many people even calling their read-through a playthrough. The set has now been concluded and consists of 4 novels, but the one I want to focus on today is relevant to this video's topic. This is Five Nights at Freddy's The Week Before, technically the second interactive novel released after VIP, which was given away digitally for free during the 10th anniversary event, though The Week Before was the first book released physically. The Week Before is set 1 week before the events of the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, aka Phone Guy's final week on the job. In this book, we actually get to play as Phone Guy himself and learn more about his life, history, and what he was actually like behind the speaker. This book's release is the main reason why I wanted to make this video, as it adds so much to his character that I absolutely adore. As we turn to the very first page, we get to learn something the fanbase has been speculating about for years. What is the Phone Guy's real name? Well, we finally know thanks to this book. Phone Guy's real name is Ralph. Just Ralph. I don't really know what you were expecting, but Ralph wasn't up there for me personally. I kinda love how lackluster of a name it is. Considering some of the main characters in this series are named Mike, Henry, and William, Ralph fits in there perfectly. His name was probably already spoiled for you in the title of the video, but I wanted to keep referring to him as the Phone Guy for the majority, because that's all we've really known Ralph as for the longest time. Now that we know his name, however, I'm going to be referring to him properly from this point on. The first page of the book is a basic introduction to Ralph and to the book's plot. It's pretty much what you'd expect. Ralph has been working as a security guard at Fazbear Entertainment for years, but this is his final week. Management has asked him to take the night shift due to a staff vacancy and temporary closure, matching up to what he says in his final call in FNAF 2.
When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take the night shift myself.
He also confirms in the same page that he truly didn't know about the animatronics being highly dangerous at night during the second game, but that's gonna change very soon. Once you get through the intro and choose your difficulty, the first night starts up and you have to start making choices. We're gonna streamline the book's plot in order to focus on Ralph's characterization, but I encourage you to pick it up and give it a read yourself. It's absolutely worth it. There's a ton of bad endings, and most will only be skimmed for characterization. I highly recommend reading it for yourself to see them all. Upon starting the first night, we learn that one of the reasons Ralph is still working at Freddy's is to provide for his 11-year-old daughter, Copelia. We're only 2 pages into the book, and immediately we have info that recontextualizes Ralph's actions in the past. This doesn't absolve him of his past sins, but having any type of family does explain why he was willing to overlook the negligence from Fazbear Entertainment. One of Ralph's most important duties as a night watchman is to keep track of the animatronics and fix anything that they break. The narrating text mentions that Ralph has to think of the children, which echoes back to that first FNAF 1 call.
So remember, these characters hold a special place in the hearts of children, and we need to show them a little respect.
When looking through the cameras, Ralph also makes a comment about how he's glad that Freddy has been restored to his classic look. Remember, in 1987, the original animatronics were replaced by the toys that featured more kid-friendly designs, and Ralph was not a fan of them. The old designs being reinstated was probably because of a certain bite happening at the previous location. Fazbear Entertainment definitely wanted to distance themselves from that incident, but at the very least, it looks to be a popular decision, especially for Ralph. After all,
I love those old characters.
While cleaning up, Ralph also thinks about why he agreed to record the audio messages for future night guards, aka the famous calls. Turns out that he wanted to do them because it helps him feel a connection to the other guards, and he hopes hearing a calming voice would help them keep a level head when things are tense. Ironically, he also says that it's nice to know after he leaves this job, a part of him will always be here. Boy, will that turn out to be true. The main task to accomplish is for Ralph to go and fix a broken light in the bathroom, so unlike in the games, we actually get to leave the office and explore the location. While cleaning under one of the tables, we actually get a bit of info concerning the fallout of the bite of 87. Ralph talks about how the press completely blew the incident out of proportion, and the place hasn't been the same since. What's really interesting though, is that it's implied the victim is somehow still alive at least up until this week, even without his frontal lobe, though it seems like he might be stuck as a vegetable. And yes, I said he. Ralph confirms that the victim was in fact male. Another new piece of info that's exclusive to this book. Once Ralph finally makes it to the bathroom to change out the light bulbs, he encounters Foxy. On one of the bad ends, he thinks about how he used to visit Foxy in Pirate's Cove at the end of his shifts, and how seeing him was always a thrill. Of course, while that's changed, it matches up to what he says in FNAF 2.
Did you ever see Foxy the Pirate? Like I said, he was always my favorite.
He also says that Foxy never bit kids specifically, implying that he did bite adults. Maybe this is a coy way of implying that it was Foxy who did the bite of 87. I still think it was most likely Mangle, but Foxy would be the other animatronic to make the most sense. While in the bathroom, we also learn a bit more about Ralph's past. Apparently as a kid, he was often bullied and ducked into bathroom stalls to hide. This is why he became a security guard in the first place, so he could help kids that can't help themselves. We are also unfortunately introduced to Ralph's very bad dad jokes. During his nights, Ralph will make a really bad dad joke in his head when things get tense. It's a really cute character quirk, but it's also really cheesy. Ralph eventually manages to screw the light bulbs into place and leave the bathroom. While the night starts to close out, we learn a bit more about what Ralph wants for his future. Once he finishes up this week, he wants to find a security guard job at his daughter's school so he could hopefully spend more time with her. He didn't exactly expect that this would be what his final week looked like, and he regretted not believing the previous night guards. Once Ralph is alone in the office near the end of his shift, he looks at the phone. He apparently recorded a volley of old messages back when he was more young and naive, and these calls seemed a lot more put together than the ones we listened to in FNAF 1. Ralph decides to record a brand new call, the first call we ever hear in the entire series.
Hello? Hello? I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night. I actually worked in that office before you. I'm finishing up my last week now, as a matter of fact, so I know it can be a bit overwhelming, but I'm here to tell you there's nothing to worry about.
I know the FNAF books have been unreliable in terms of their canonicity to the main game timeline, but I mean, come on. From the first night alone, it should be pretty darn obvious this book is 100% canon to the FNAF games. There is too much attention to detail when it comes to making sure everything matches up to the game's lore. I also really love how this gives a plausible reason as to why Ralph mentions the bite of 87 in the first call. Turns out he's been thinking about the bite all night, so he let it slip while recording. That's an awesome way to naturally foreshadow that line. Once Ralph finishes up the night, he heads back home to his young daughter, Coppelia. The novel doesn't mention a mom at any point, so it can be assumed that Ralph is a single father. He's the one person that's taking care of her, and to me, that's a pretty good reason to stay in a job that you hate. Ralph and Coppelia's relationship is absolutely adorable. It's rare that we see a positive parent-child relationship in this series, so seeing a father be so genuinely caring and loving to his child is such a breath of fresh air, but it all just feels so bittersweet knowing what's going to happen to Ralph at the end of this story. As the second night starts up, Ralph's new task is to repair Bonnie's head, which has somehow fallen completely off of his shoulders. As Ralph passes by Pirate's Cove, we find out that the sorry out of order sign was actually made by him, and it hurt him to put it up due to Foxy being his favorite. As Ralph starts to fix Bonnie's head, he mentions that the animatronics still deserve his respect because of all the children they make happy every day. I like how this echoes back to one of his only calm lines in the first night call.
So remember, these characters hold a special place in the hearts of children, and we need to show them a little respect.
While fixing the head, we also get a very interesting page where Ralph calls up one of his co-workers in maintenance to help with Bonnie's repairs, named Dave. You might remember that in the FNAF Silverized novel trilogy, the fake name William Afton used as a night guard to hide his identity was Dave Miller. Considering the books like to parallel the games, I think it's pretty likely that Dave from maintenance is actually Afton. He only appears briefly over the phone twice in the book, but I think it's really interesting how Ralph might have worked with Afton so closely while never knowing what crimes he committed. There will be a moment later in the book that may allude to something like this. Something else we learn about Ralph is that apparently his father was a perfectionist. Nothing Ralph did was ever good enough for him. While that mentality is still ingrained in him now, he never wants to treat Coppelia that way and focuses instead on celebrating her accomplishments, even if they aren't perfect. After recording a brand new message for the second night where he clarifies how to deal with the animatronics more effectively, including Foxy, he leaves the restaurant.
Hello? Well, if you're hearing this and you made it to day 2, congrats. I won't talk quite as long this time since Freddy and his friends tend to become more active as the week progresses. It might be a good idea to peek at those cameras while I talk, just to make sure everyone's in their proper place, you know.
Once he makes it back home to Coppelia, they have a quick conversation before she goes to school where she accidentally mistakes Freddy's name for Fredbear. And I think this is the moment where I want to pause and talk about Ralph's relationship with his daughter in more detail. It's mentioned that there was a point where Ralph did take Coppelia to Freddy's when she was 7, but she got scared, vomited, and they've never been back since. This is quite possibly the best evidence I have that, while flawed, Ralph genuinely was a good father. We have seen time and time again that despite all of the problems revolving around the Fazbear name, he still adores the characters and the happiness it gives to young kids. He really loves Freddy's, but because his daughter's experience with the pizzeria was so negative, he completely separated his work from his personal life to a point where she doesn't even fully remember the main mascot's name. He chose his daughter's comfortability over his love for his job. It's already told to us that everything Ralph does is for his daughter, including this final week. I think Coppelia's negative experience and him focusing on her more than his job might be what originally opened his eyes to how terrible Fazbear Entertainment has been regarding all of these disappearances and deaths. There was a point where he believed he was making a genuine difference, but that hope has long since died. At this point, he's simply covering up for the company's faults. As we move into the next section, we will watch as he mirrors the FNAF 1 calls, becoming more panicked and nervous as his time goes on. Once the third night starts up, we learn a bit more about Ralph's past and how he's always been an overachiever, which gives us a bit of a clearer picture on his childhood. To be an overachiever and a perfectionist usually translates to being driven by a relentless pursuit of success. One of the common problems with this mindset is that it makes it incredibly difficult to appreciate your achievements or to seek out appreciation for those achievements. This makes Ralph a perfect contender for working at Freddy's, an underpaid job where his accomplishments are rarely praised. It's why he's given the Shallow Employee of the Month award so many times but has never gotten a raise. It's why he's still working this job after all these years, and it's why he's so willing to minimize the incidents and crimes that have befallen the Fazbear name. We find out in this night that Ralph originally studied children's psychology in community college before he dropped out, and that's what he believes made him a good candidate for the position at Freddy's. But I wonder if management saw someone who had maladaptive perfectionism and took advantage of that to get get a perfect employee, one who would do whatever is asked of him in order to get a paycheck with little praise, and one who would be a willing apologist for the company. Regardless, the task for this night is for Ralph to clean up a bloody puddle and repair a window in one of the party rooms. It's not a problem though, as the pizzeria has a collection of industrial bleaches and stain removers, calling back to that section of the Fazbear Entertainment greeting.
Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced.
What Ralph thinks about while cleaning makes me iffy on his morality. It pretty much perfectly showcases the complexity of his character. Because while getting the supplies, he finds an article about the kids that went missing at Freddy's, and as a father himself, he says in his mind, those poor children, those poor parents. But only a few pages later, once the blood spill is cleaned up, a spill that even he knows is most likely a human's, the narration says, if there's no evidence, it may as well never happened. Management will be pleased. I want to make it clear that this is the narration that says this, not Ralph himself. I do think that Ralph is trying to stay a good person. It's obvious that he's kind and polite and tries to do the right thing despite being locked into a job that usually practices criminal negligence. But that's just the issue. Ralph is a good man caught in an awful situation. He's cleaning up the crimes that should be reported to the police, crimes that should put Fazbear Entertainment into hot water. But remember, he's locked into a contract. He has to do this or else he gets fired and loses the potential of getting a better job that's closer to his daughter. In one of the bad endings, Ralph ends up breaking Chica, and in response, the company cuts him absolutely no slack and sends him a bill and termination notice, putting him in debt. Fazbear Entertainment does not care about him, but he needs that recommendation to find a better job. The whole time he's at Freddy's, he's just tried to continually convince himself that everything is fine despite all the deaths, despite what he's feeling for the missing children and the parents of those children. He wasn't just lying to Mike in those phone calls, he was lying to himself. He is a morally flawed character doing awful things for a good reason. By the end of the third night, Ralph is officially done with Freddy's. Any remaining love he had in his heart for the company and characters has been extinguished. He's ready to move on. Once he's back at the security office, Ralph thinks about the blood puddle he just cleaned up and looks to parts and surface to view the empty Freddy suit, which makes him start to think about what might happen if he's stuffed inside one of them. These are the thoughts that go into the next phone message he records, and that's why in that night 3 call he's so focused on potentially surviving being stuffed inside a suit.
Hello, hey, you're doing great. Most people don't last this long. I mean, you know, they usually move on to other things by now. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant. Anyway, I better not take up too much of your time. Things start getting real tonight.
I really love how this book gives such good reasons as to why Ralph talks about certain things in the phone calls during the main game. It's such a natural way to explain his behavior and give a reason as to why the calls seem so disjointed. We have a couple more nights to go, but we've learned a lot about Ralph as a person. Now it's time to see how he'll act as he's pushed against a wall. Once Ralph gets home, he thinks about how the nights are really starting to get to him, especially after the blood puddle. We're treated to a really cute scene of Ralph spending some more time with Capella. She wants to stay home from school to be around him, even if he's just sleeping. Ralph is unfortunately too mindful of Capella's future and still sends her off to school. I say unfortunately because we know what's going to happen to him soon. You have the option of giving Capella a souvenir from the previous night, and all the options give pretty cute scenes, except for the Mr. Cupcake one. That one's just mentally scarring. Again, it really should be said how good of a father Ralph is. Everything he's doing at Freddy's is for his daughter. Almost every decision he makes is not for his benefit, but for hers. Also, he can be more present in her life and give her a happy childhood. This is so painful to read, knowing what's going to happen to him. But moving right along, the fourth night starts up, and this is where things get a little weird. When Ralph gets to the pizzeria, he notices that the lights are still on, and the animatronics are much more active than normal. Apparently, if the lights aren't off at the end of the day, they don't go into their night mode, so this night barely has Ralph interact with the animatronics. Instead, he sneaks around around them in order to make it to the breaker and shut the lights off manually. There are still some moments where we learn a bit more about Ralph though. When Ralph ducks into Pirate's Cove to hide, we learn that one of the reasons why Foxy was his favorite was because of his lifelong love of pirate stories. Of course, now that love had been long since soured. In one of the bad endings, Ralph also reveals that he's a fan of point-and-click adventure games, which is funny because Five Nights at Freddy's as a whole could be called a point-and-click horror franchise. Ralph also makes a lot of dad jokes, and I mean a lot of dad jokes. As the nights have been going on, his nervous jokey tone has become more apparent. It was already mentioned that the job was getting to him, but this was further proof of it. Dad jokes aren't just something he does to make his daughter cringe, it's his coping mechanism. There's also a really interesting thought that Ralph has about his value to Fazbear Entertainment. In his words, people have never lined up for positions, so he wonders if he was the only option. I do think he was one of the only options, but because of his overachieving and perfectionist attitude, it made him an easier pawn for the company to use. That's why he was hired originally. Ralph does end his night after this, but I actually want to take a second to share a theory with you all. The book makes it very clear that Ralph has not worked the night shift before this at any location. He's never had to deal with the wandering animatronics at night. He mentions that he may take the night shift in FNAF 2, but he doesn't actually take it until his final week at Freddy's, the week before FNAF 1. Fazbear Entertainment has already proven that they are a scummy company that will do anything to sweep the crimes that happen in their establishments under the rug. They've done it multiple times before. He's been with the company for years and is most likely under contract to not talk about anything criminal he sees while working there, but contracts can only do so much. Eventually, it will expire and he's going to tell someone. There's already been a history of security guards disappearing at night, and as we hear from the opening greeting, they will do whatever they can to hide the evidence if someone dies. It's the perfect way to take care of their loose ends. Ralph being put onto the night shift is supposed to be a death sentence. I bet the company didn't believe he would make it past the first couple nights, much less the first 4. Once Ralph makes it back home, he hugs Capella and snuggles with her before she has to go to school. This page in particular feels different, like a calm before the storm. We all know what's about to happen. Capella and Ralph talk one last time before she leaves for school and he dozes off. Here Capella asks if Ralph could stay home from work tonight. He barely replies that he can't. Just one more night. He's doing this for her. Everything is for her. He wants to be in her life as she grows up and wants to give her that happy childhood. Just one more night. As he walks up to the establishment for his 5th night, even after everything the animatronics did to him, after all the turmoil, Ralph still remarks that they deserve caretakers that appreciate and understand them. He always did love the characters and wanted them to continue to give happy memories to the kids. He also comments that there is definitely something else going on at the pizzeria. Every time he leaves, he struggles to remember the night before. It's like there was an aura around the pizzeria that made whoever walked in forget what they saw once they left. Ralph's final night is a hectic mess. All of the animatronics are coming to his office at the same time. He barely shuts the door on Foxy, barely closes it on Chica, and attacks Bonnie as he tries to leave the vent. They were relentless, and he was running out of options. During his battle against the animatronics, he thinks back on how he was rewarded by Fazbear Entertainment for stopping a set of Rubers. He was given his own pizza for a month, but it only lasted for a few days due to it being awful. Ralph has always been mistreated by the company, and now that all comes to a head here. Ralph cracks more bad dad jokes during this night than any other night. He's stressed out of his mind and tries to find ways to cope while defending himself. In one bad end, Ralph interprets Freddy's Toreador March music box as a call to fight, and he does. He stares at him on the monitor. During this time, he imagines himself as the victim and the perpetrator of a terrible crime, calling out his bystander nature to all of Afton and Fazbear Entertainment's crimes. He was a victim and a complicit accomplice all at once. But one thing is made very clear. There is no way out for Ralph. In one ending, he does barely make it out alive, but he survives to live an uncertain future. Every other scenario features Ralph dying in multiple different ways, and none of these are canon. We know what his fate is. If you have the phone item, you can choose to make one final call. Leave one final message to the future night guard. You already know what it is.
Oh, hey, wow, day 4. I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's it's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did. Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. Yeah, I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. You know. Oh no.
He never did figure out how to fight Freddy, did he? Once he comes to, the only vision Ralph has is through the eye holes of the Freddy suit in parts and service. His body was crushed, being forcibly stuffed into one of the spare suits, just like how he warned. There is another ending and a Night 6 to the book, but that's non-canon. Ralph doesn't make it past Night 5 in the canon timeline. If you want to see this for yourself, go check out the book. I promise you, it's worth the read. But that's it. This is how Ralph the Phone Guy's story ends. Ralph dies in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on November 6th at some point in the 1990s if we go by the date on Mike's check. His body is seemingly never recovered and his disappearance is left unsolved. Coppelia is possibly orphaned and life goes on. Fazbear Entertainment goes on. The series goes on. Without him. It's a bleak, sad ending. This book did so much to humanize the phone guy and turn him into an actual character. He's no longer just a guy on the phone that dies working at Freddy's. He's Ralph, a loving father who does all he does for his daughter's sake, who suffered torment at a job that never cared about him so she could have a happy life. And this is what he got in return. It's heartbreaking, but this is how his story ended. As we wrap things up, let's go and collect our thoughts in the final section. So who really was the phone guy? Well, he was more than just a voice on the phone. Even early on, we knew that he was more than just a tutorial. He was someone who loved the Freddy's characters and the experiences the restaurants gave to children. He loved pirates, and Foxy was always his favorite. He stuttered over his words and made awful dad jokes when he was stressed, and he didn't always tell the full truth. His worst sin is that he was an awful minimizer, working under the boot of a company that didn't care about him or anything else except making money. He died in a sad, tragic way at the very end of his final work week. And for a long time, that's really all we knew about him. But this book changed everything. It gave him a name, a story, a family. It turned him into a person, showed us how real he really was. It only made the pain of his death sting that much more in hindsight. Ralph as a character represents how the crimes of William Afton and the negligence of Fazbear Entertainment affected an ordinary person working at the pizzerias. In my personal opinion, he was a victim just as much as he was complicit in the crimes that happened, but still, he didn't deserve this. He deserved to watch Coppelia grow up, to live a quiet life with the people he loved, but that was taken from him. It's why I believe that his appearance in Ultimate Custom Night is a perfect final send-off to his character. I think Ralph was chosen for the roster because he represents the ordinary people affected by Afton's crimes, the people that Afton didn't even think about. Afton will forever hear Ralph's voice echo in his ears for seemingly eternity. I think that's a fantastic way to give Ralph a bit of justice. In a way, he did succeed in one thing. Ralph did protect the animatronics and helped them continue to make people happy. They did find someone who appreciates, understands, and respects them. But it's not Mike, nor is it anyone that works at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It's us. The audience that have been playing the Five Nights at Freddy's games for years. Even years after the character died in the story, the animatronic characters have survived in pop culture and are some of the most recognizable horror mascots in the modern day. In a meta way, Ralph did exactly what he wanted to do, and the memory and love for his character is still so fresh that he is the title character in a book celebrating a decade of this franchise. He was here to take care of our fears, but when his time came near, he was no longer here. Yeah, he was the phone guy, but he wasn't just the phone guy. He was Ralph, and his memory will continue to live on for years to come. Thank you all so much for watching. This video was probably one of my most ambitious ones yet, since I had to pick apart this entire book. I even took notes on it so I could refer back to certain pages while writing my script. The week before was the reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place. I always loved the phone guy as a character, and the book added so much to his characterization that I absolutely loved. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, leave a hype if you can, and comment down below what your thoughts are on Ralph and who you'd like to see me cover on the channel next. With the FNAF 2 movie out, I can't wait to dive into some of the characters and talk about their role in the film as well. Alright, I'll talk to you all later. See you on the flip side. Bye bye!
Hello? Hello? Well, if you're hearing this, then chances are you've made a very poor career choice.